Hello, my name is Father Dan Joyce, Vice President for Mission. I'm coming to you live from Wolfington Hall here on the Hawk Hill campus of St. Joe's. And so I am actually with some of my students from Theology 155, the Catholic social tradition. So we're here interested in exploring our particular topic today, which is Universal Apostolic Preference of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. One of those, which is called Accompanying Young People to a Hope-Filled Future. And of course, the one way that we do that in the Society of Jesus, not the only way, but one of the major ways, is the Jesuit investment in and concern with, for the last nearly 500 years, the work of education, formal education. Which is kind of ironic because St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, actually was not interested in Jesuits becoming teachers or running schools. He felt like that kind of tied the Jesuit down too much, didn't free him up to be able to help people explore what they really desired, especially through his spiritual exercises, the spirituality of the Jesuits, which we're going to explore in more depth on Thursday with Father George Burr. So you can tune into that particular talk on Thursday afternoon. But today we're going to look at this commitment of the Jesuits to accompanying young people to a hope-filled future. And of course, there's a wide variety of ways you can do that, and working with young people in any number of means and any ways in which they have activities in their own lives, and we can be involved in that. But formally, education, of course, is a way to help folks grow and develop, especially their talents, their skills. And here at St. Joseph's University, of course, we're very committed to that intellectual tradition of developing critical thinking skills, as well as an ability to discern and make decisions in our lives. So things that we learn here that we may learn in any number of subject areas, but we take with us as a set of abilities and processes and skills and talents for the rest of our lives. So it's great to be with you. I am joined by my colleague, our colleague here at St. Joseph's, Katherine Cartagena-Davis, who she is also here at St. Joseph's in the Graduate Admissions Office as an analyst, right? And she can give a more elaborate introduction of herself. But both of us are here to share with you a little bit about how how Jesuit education really does function in a way that comes in a variety of forms. Because one of the things that's very clear about Jesuit education from the beginning with St. Ignatius and the first Jesuits is you basically create a school and educational enterprise in a context that makes most sense to it. The spirituality of St. Ignatius is very adaptable to what is the reality of someone, what is their needs and means for living their life and discerning. And Ignatius was very big on what's helpful you do and what's not helpful you stop doing. So adapting and innovating and adjusting to the context in which you're in, coming out of that spirituality, that as a spiritual value, is now brought into the educational context for Jesuits. So there are Jesuit schools of every sort around the planet. The Jesuit Educational Network is the oldest and largest educational network in the world. Founded basically by the end of the 1550s into the 1560s. It has continued to grow and expand into almost every country of the world. And it is here as and it exists here in the United States through more formal education, such as our 27 Jesuit universities here in the continental United States, on 50-some high schools, as well as a variety of middle schools and primary schools, and certain types of actually specialized schools. But the Jesuit Educational Network around the world can manifest itself in almost every type of school and almost every type of cultural context, and therefore is meeting the needs of a pretty wide variety of students. There are 2.3 million students currently in Jesuit schools around the globe. And again, those could range from traditional colleges, universities, high schools, specialty research institutes where students study a particular thing. Let's close that. Yeah. And then also it could manifest, like the Jesuits some years ago opened up a medical school in Chad, for example, because there was a real lack of medical education and lack of medical personnel. some of the best business schools, exclusive business schools that only teach business, like ISAD in Barcelona, and some of those, the XLRI in India. These are top-notch business schools around them. So it can be really almost any type of educational enterprise that the Jesuits are willing to sponsor and develop if that particular context, that particular community really needs it. So my experience is, of course, I'm a graduate of a Jesuit school. I'm a graduate here of St. Joseph's University in 1988. And then I've gone on to work at, I don't know, 4 or 5 different Jesuit schools. I'm back here at my alma mater. But one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit from my own experience was one of my first jobs out of college was to teach at a Jesuit sixth form, what we call post-secondary schooling in the British system called sixth form, where I taught that in a Jesuit sixth form in the Central American country of Belize. So I'm going to share a little bit about that experience, which was unique from my own experience here at St. Joseph's. Katherine will join us a little bit after that, after my brief sharing, to share her own experience. She's a double graduate of a Jesuit school. She's a graduate here of St. Joseph's for her graduate work, but she also is a graduate of a Jesuit high school in El Alto, Bolivia, which is a large city right next to La Paz in the country of Bolivia. And she's going to talk about a whole particular network of schools called Fe y Alegría, which educates about 300,000 people in the country of Bolivia. And that network is something we are partnered with. In particular, St. Joe's University has a very specific partnership with Fe y Alegría Bolivia, the network of schools there. And over some 25 years, we've been exchanging research and collaboration between our faculty and students and the faculty and students across their network. We also have a partnership with the Fe y Alegría schools called Foi Joie in French in the country of Haiti. So we also have a partnership with that same network of schools, but as it's located in Haiti. Again, a very different context. And our partnership with them is mostly in the form of some assistance with regards to curriculum and development. And eventually, we hope it will also include a virtual development with regards to some higher education offerings down the road through what's called the Jesuit Worldwide Network. So it's a big network. We're already confusing you with lots of descriptions of it, but we're going to zero in with some practical examples. So I'm going to speak first about my own experience of moving from a traditional Jesuit university here in the United States as a young teacher, and then moving to teach at St. John's College in Belize. Katherine will then join me and talk about her experience at the high school Jesus Obrero in La Paz or El Alto, Bolivia. So my own experience was I came to St. Joseph's because it was a Jesuit school. Very few students did that and continue to do that. But my mother convinced me that there was something special about Jesuit education. She had done her graduate work at Marquette University, and I believed her. I also just wanted to get out of Pittsburgh, where I grew up, and come to a big city out east. And I looked at schools in big cities out east, and St. Joe's accepted me. I drove out here. I took a look at a school 7 miles down the road, and it was okay, but it felt a little too much like what I knew. And there I found on the edge of the city of Philadelphia, here on what's called Hawk Hill, the little St. Joseph's College University, this little Catholic college that had a nice little gritty feel to it, and was willing to offer me what I'd been looking for, which was a liberal arts education and an ability to develop my own mind and talents as I saw fit at the time. And I enjoyed the opportunity to come to know a new urban setting of Philadelphia. As I developed my own gifts and interests while I was at St. Joe's, it got me to expand my world. But I also had a good friend that I came to know here who was a scholarship student who had finished 2 years of college, more or less, at what was called St. John's Junior College / St. John's Sixth Form in Belize. And so he became very close to my family. And after I graduated, I was working for 1 year out in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he contacted me and said, "Hey, my alma mater, St. John's, is looking for someone to come down here and teach philosophy. Isn't that your major?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Why don't you come down?" So I wrote the president, Father Leo Weber at the time. I got a little onion skin paperback on airmail, and he offered me a job. "Please come, but you must come for 2 years." So I said, why not? I was 22 and broke. And as I tell our students, you're only 22 and broke once. Enjoy it while it lasts. 32 and 52 and broke is a little different. So I decided on 22 to get on a plane and spend my last couple $100 getting to Belize because I knew I had a job. And I arrived there and I taught eventually philosophy as well as history and social ethics while I was there at St. John's. Loved it. It was a great experience for me. And ultimately, it was an experience that fostered my own Jesuit vocation. And I ended up joining the Jesuits after my 2 years in Belize. What it taught me, though, was that, again, context matters for Jesuit education, and that Jesuit education has this incredible capacity to adapt to the real needs of a particular place and a particular people and communities. I don't know that Jesuit education has always fully understood the kind of complex intersectionalities that sometimes come together in particular cultural situations. But I would say that the network of Jesuit education over 500 years has been good at exploring that and letting that expand and understanding it better than most, to be frank. Lots of our education enterprises around the world can be real modes for limiting what people view and understand if we don't look at it in an open way and instead think this is all that we need to transmit by way of training or what we think is education or what we think is truth, instead of what I think comes about in a Jesuit university or Jesuit school is usually an appreciation for that critical thinking that expands and explores what might be the horizon of truth that unfolds a greater sense of what might be real and what might be true and good, and I would argue beautiful, in the world around us and in our minds and with our ideas. So I'm a big fan of allowing us to understand how we can continue to explore our own lives, our own minds, our own hearts and souls through an educational process. And that's why St. Ignatius was so attracted, having developed a spirituality that did the same thing similarly. It wasn't surprising that he saw the value in accepting invitations to start opening up schools and assigning Jesuits to work in them. And so this particular enterprise for me unfolded in a very particular way as I entered a small country that was recently out of its own colonial past, so to speak. Belize had only been granted independence from Great Britain about 10 years earlier. So it was a young country in that sense, but old and fabulous cultures. It was a very multicultural and multiracial country and context. There were several languages being spoke. People had landed there, sometimes by force, by enslavement, and by forced exportation of labor through the British Empire. And some had ended up there because of displacement from other parts of Central America. That was certainly the case when I was there in those years. Back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there were lots of displacement from other Central American countries where very repressive regimes were in operation. And so I found myself also there at a time when Jesuit education was highlighted around the globe, because while I was in Belize, just a couple countries over, 6 Jesuit professors at the University of Central America were actually murdered by the army in El Salvador for their work, really their academic work, and their work at trying to settle and negotiate between two sides of a civil war. Factions within the army, factions within lots of the country were not interested in settling a war that to some extent was profitable to some, because both the United States and other foreign interests were funding that war. And these 6 Jesuit professors, especially the president of the university, Ignacio Echeverria, were killed in their home for their work. And much of their research was very community-based and very focused on the needs of El Salvador, especially those who are most underrepresented in the economy, underrepresented in the society at many levels. So I found that as quite an inspiration for myself as I was working also in Central America at St. John's. I was doing my best at the time as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old American citizen whose country has a fraught history in that part of the world. Just not far from me, for example, would have been the great big Voice of America radio station that was propelling U.S. interest information across Latin America, and as well as there was a strong presence from the U.S. Embassy there. I was also trying to figure out how to be a teacher to students who there were almost no textbooks at the time that would have had a perspective from their country, from their cultures. We were trying to take information and perspectives in the texts that we used from other countries. There at St. John's Sixth Form, we were also preparing students to compete in the Cambridge exams in England. The same exams that would be taken both across England and the UK, as well as in many of their former territories that are now the Commonwealth. So our students were preparing quite seriously to compete on a global level, literally, for some of those tests that they would finish after their 2 years in Sixth Form. And many of them were also considering finishing their degree, because 4-year degree completion in Belize at the time was quite limited. St. John's was prepping some of those folks to complete their degrees in the United States, Jamaica, or other parts of Central America. And that was also an interesting thing, to instill in them that desire for further and higher education, and hopefully the desire to return back and help develop their own nation, their own people in Belize, because it definitely needed that kind of talent. And there was a bit of what we would call, quote unquote, a brain drain problem. So those were some of the challenges for me in that context of my own educational work at St. John's that allowed me then, I think, to really appreciate the intersectionality of cultures, the complexity of trying to be an educator in the midst of multicultural settings, and in the midst of fraught and difficult histories of oppression, and where education may have been not developed very well or even misused to keep people back or down. So I really found that my learning as a first-time teacher in a Jesuit school, that was sort of my first Jesuit educational experience as an educator, allowed me to really offer me, I think, a broad range of what I needed to pay attention to for the rest of my career as an educator, always striving for that way in which education can be more liberating and allow us to explore what I would say are the edges or horizons of new knowledge that allows people to be empowered to develop their talents, and then to have an empowerment that gives them action to represent who they are and what they believe is part of a just and good world. So I'm going to end there and turn it over to Katherine, who's going to talk about a very different context and a different type of school that's part of this broad family of Jesuit education, which is one of the primary ways in which we Jesuits and we at Jesuit universities and schools help lead young people to a hope-filled future. Katherine, so anything I missed about your own biography, please share. And we're looking forward to hearing about Bolivia.
Thank you, Father Joyce, and thank you for the introduction. Yes, I am a systems analyst here at the graduate's office, and worked and collaborated with many of you. So it's a pleasure to be sharing a little bit more of my story, and how my background was also, influenced by the Jesuit education. And this goes back all the way to Bolivia. So I want to share my screen. I hope I don't share the wrong one. Sometimes it happens. Okay. I added a little bit of information about what is Fe y Alegría. But before I jump ahead and talk about it, I just wanted to ask, who have not heard, if you can raise your hand or comment on the chat about Fe y Alegría and that movement. Only if you haven't heard, because I'm hoping many of us have heard.
And just to say that of the 2.3 million students in Jesuit schools right now, I would estimate that well over 1 million of those students are in the Fe y Alegría network right now. So it's the largest sector of Jesuit education.
So I'm glad some people are commenting. And although I'm not glad to know that, many of you haven't heard of this because it's very important and centered to Jesuits, I think this is a great opportunity then for us to share as a community of what our Jesuit education does. So what Fe y Alegría is, as it says here, it's a movement, and I have a good translation over here, of a popular comprehensive education movement. So basically, I'm going to read this. Fe y Alegría, Faith and Joy, the translation to English, is an international movement of comprehensive popular education and social promotion whose action is fundamentally aimed at developing quality educational processes in poor and excluded populations in order to enhance their personal development and social participation. And I highlighted here the poor and excluded populations because that's where I was, and that's my experience really touched on that, and how impactful was having a school or being educated in a Fe y Alegría school, because I could really see the effect and the benefits of this movement. So a little bit more of like what Fe y Alegría is, and particularly in Bolivia, I believe this is basically the projects or the focuses that they have around or across countries. But I'm not 100% sure. I know these are in Bolivia. So we have regular education, which means regular schools. We're going to say it right now, and I'm going to go more in depth on that because that was my experience. But they also have inclusive education, which means they include or have programs for people with disabilities, students with disabilities. And this is big in Bolivia because the government, we don't have schools for people with disabilities. So people, if you have a disability, it's really hard for you to go get educated. So Fe y Alegría is one of the schools or the movements that really does something about it. And I know they're trying to do even more, but it is a big effort that it should be in combination with government and other entities. Another part of focus that they have is technical schools, which means basically after they graduate from high school, they can have a degree in some sort of very practical, and they can apply it as soon as they graduate. So that's also very important in a poor country, and I'll explain it more later. Then there's also the unschool education, they call it, the actual translation, but it's very basically it's farming. So how they teach little kids, as you can see in the little picture, I don't know if you can see it, but they teach students to use what they have and to produce from what they have and where they are. And I think Father Joyce has beautiful experiences actually in going to Bolivia and seeing this at firsthand on how they plant things and they produce things in even areas where it's very cold, but they figured out ways to make it happen. There is also a very strong focus on education in values, and this is values-based education, which is centered in Christian values, but nonetheless like very important values that will help the communities. And the last one is teacher formation, which they also took a good emphasis on educate their teachers so they can educate their students. So to go a little bit in depth of or lay the land of like where Bolivia is and set the stage, I should say. Bolivia is in the heart of South America, so you can see here in the map. It's a land, and it's one of the poorest countries of South America. I've heard that was changing lately, but I'm not 100% sure how much. But the actual name is Plurinational State of Bolivia. And why I wanted to bring this up is because it is a very diverse. It's a very diverse in that there's a lot of indigenous population, and that brings out a variety of communities. 12.8 million people, and the main languages are Spanish, Aymara, and Quechua. Aymara and Quechua are dialects that they are speak, but it's a high percentage of people that they speak these languages in Bolivia. So here I also want to point out, so the ethnic composition, the majority are mestizo, which is a mix, but there's also a large percentage of indigenous and smaller percentage of white people and other. Here I wanted to show a little bit of how El Alto looks like, and that is this is a street market in El Alto, and the city of La Paz is there. So basically, La Paz is in a valley. It's a valley surrounded by mountains, as you can see. And I did wanted to show this picture particularly because, as you can see, there's a lot of dirt. And although it's been developing more and more El Alto, I want to show this picture because that's how I grew up. That's how it was when I was there. And I came to the US when I was 19, and that's 2008. So that's what I remember. So I wanted to bring us up a little bit of where I was. But it also has beautiful views of the city and other areas. So I didn't just want to show a bad picture. So talking about a little bit more of education. This is where I can go a little more in depth of like what Fe Alegría is. We have public schools and private schools like we have it here, right? And you can see in the picture of the public schools, the students are in this white kind of gown. And that's very specific and differential for students that are going to a public school. So you know you are a public school student. And they use that so, you know, people, especially for kids that they don't have clothes or anything like that, so or dirty or something, can cover it, and that way helps. On the other hand, you can see the private schools. And the private schools, they are more they will have a uniform, and they will private school, so they have to pay, they have a better place, and things like that. And what Fe Alegría provides, it's something in the middle. So that quality of education provided to people who are poor and don't have the same access to go to a private school, that's what Fe Alegría does. That's what the schools of Fe Alegría do. And in that picture, you can see we may also wear uniforms, but we may have better sittings and better classrooms and things like that. So, and also to put into perspective a little bit more of like education in Bolivia, we have two shifts, the morning shift and the afternoon shift. And this is generally to accommodate people, students that, you know, in the area. So students will go from 8 a.m. till noon, and then we'll go from 1 p.m. till 5. That's generally the typical school time. Fe Alegría provides with extracurricular activities, which may happen in the afternoon. So if you go in the morning, you may have in the afternoon, may have a little more extra hours, or sometimes in the weekends, which will allow you to learn a little more, or a little extra, or something more specific. And this I'm talking about on a regular school, where when they have the practical schools, or the schools that they have specific projects or programs, those are even more, you know, full day schools. But from my experience, it was just a regular school, but with more extracurricular activities. I also wanted to show this to put things into perspective about the education and people educated. So this chart shows a little bit of how much people are educated. In 2008, we see that the majority got a primary education. and less of a secondary and superior. We see an increase of secondary education in 2014, but still not that much for superior education. So it was just to put a perspective, in percentages of what are we talking about of people going to schools and being educated. And as you can see, there is a consistent a little bit more or a little bit less of a 10% of people in Bolivia that are still uneducated. Okay, so going a little more into my own experience in Bolivia. This is me. I was able to find pictures of my actual school. This is my high school in Bolivia. The name was Jesus Obrero, Fe y Alegría. And here are my best friends. And you can have a kind of like a view of a little bit of what's happening there and how the school is set up. So there's basically there was the basketball, all the areas for playing was in the center, and around were the classrooms. The infrastructure in comparison to other public schools was definitely way much more developed. And as you can see, we're using uniforms, and it's just an environment of community center. And there are, and I think it's my next slide, where I'm like, there's three things that really impacted me the most in my own experience in Bolivia. And one was like the infrastructure of the schools. And this was because I remember when I was going to, I just went to high school. My elementary school was in a public school. And I do remember just having, when you have like the walls like falling apart, or like not a good desk that is falling apart, and those are big distractions for education. So you can't really concentrate on learning. Because all of these things are making a lot of noise on, and almost like a reminder of like like of the quality of life that you're having. And when I went to secondary education and just having a little more stable places, stable classrooms, it really provided for me this time and period of time of my life where I could really concentrate on learning. And I think that was very, very important for me. It also something interesting in the education in Bolivia is that we don't have, like in here in the US, I believe most schools, or if not all schools, are like students go from classroom to classroom. But in Bolivia, the teachers come to your classroom. So you're with the same 40 people the whole year. That's your class. And so the teachers rotate and come to you. And that's normal for all education in Bolivia. But something interesting, it was the labs. We had labs for chemistry, biology, and physics. And that's very unique. Not every school has that. Not every school has a lab for this STEM classes. And so that was very, very important, very unique. It spikes your curiosity, you're more open to learning, and definitely provides you for the environment of learning. The other thing that really impacted me was the extracurricular activities. And this was, we had computer classes, and I forgot to translate this word, dactylographia. Father, I don't know if you know what it means. Dactylography, is that what it is? Like the type machines?
Yeah, typing. Yeah,
yes.
typing.
So we had typing classes. And although people will say, well, who wants to do typing? I mean, now it's very essential, right? When you're using computers. I think it was very, very good for me to have these extracurricular activities. But also they supported you and encouraged you to be into leadership, and provided you with a lot of opportunities for that. So my first job was as a teacher, a dance teacher in the school. When after I graduated, they hired me to teach dance, because they just saw how I organized the whole school. I had to arrange large dances, very traditional dances, and I remember my teacher said, or the director of the school said, you can teach. And I was like, how can this be possible? And it's like, no, we're trying to encourage students also to take on leadership, and this is important for us, and this is the value of our Fay Alegria school. So to me, that was very impactful, because I think it really helped me from early on to develop those skills that later helped me, especially now that I am here in the US. And the last one, and I think the most important for me, was the values-based education, which was definitely the focus on our Christian values. And although my school didn't have a strong push, I will say like that, to it was a Catholic school, but it was not publicized like that. I'm not sure how to explain that. We did have mass every Friday and things like that, but it was more like a combination of a public school and a Catholic school. But very open, yet very much focused on all the values, that we have: respect and love, and building community, and many other things that I think were very fundamental and essential for me as I was growing up and as I came to the US. So a little bit of how many schools are in Fay Alegria. There's 401 schools of Fay Alegria in Bolivia alone. But that's it. I think that slide went down for whatever reason.
All
So
right.
that's it.
Yeah, and in your statistics there too, Catherine was saying about almost now, I'll correct my previous, almost 400,000 people are being educated in Bolivia now with Fay Alegria. Okay. Okay, I think I think people can unmute themselves and ask any questions if they would like to. So I'm open to receiving that for either Catherine or myself. I'm just going to try to expand this and also see if we can bring in gallery. Let's try that. Okay, bueno. All right, so we're willing to open up any questions if anybody would like to ask. And again, this is a primary way in which we are, I think the Jesuits are in the Jesuit world of ministry, accompanying young people to a hope-filled future, is these innovative ways in which education happens in all parts of the world. Yeah, so let's open it up for questions and see where folks want to go with this. Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
I just want to state my appreciation, and Catherine, I really enjoyed yours because I had the opportunity to teach at a Fay Alegria school in 1996 outside Cochabamba. It served a large orphanage, but also the surrounding community. And it was just an amazing place. And they offered some trade classes to students. Was one of the extracurricular was building things, learning electricity. I got to offer a creative writing course, and the kids wrote their stories. That was just amazing how supported it was. And then the director of the school, the head, took all of us who wanted to go, I don't know how many children went, a lot, to the central square in Cochabamba and displayed all of their work. And people going to the central offices would say, "What? You live at El Ciudad del Niños and you made that?" The kids would stand there and say, "Yes, I made that. I have worth. I'm valuable." And it was just so nice. So amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that,
Incredible.
Martha. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. No, I think Fe Alegría, one of their little taglines is "Where the road ends, we begin." Now, that might mean the road in an urban setting or in a rural setting. The other thing about Fe Alegría is they will only create a school in a particular community if that community is willing to invest their own sweat equity, so to speak, into the school, so that there's empowerment and ownership. It's not what you might call, typical outsider development, because so 50% of the resources for every Fe Alegría school must come from within the community. And that literally can mean in some of the schools that are boarding schools, they call yachiwases or houses of wisdom, depending on the language of the people. They will literally, they're going to expand the school. Every kid comes to school that Monday with a 2x4, and that's part of the construction project. Parents come together and involve themselves in the construction. They'll build the desks, and any other variety of ways in which there's an investment on the part of the community of the parents, but beyond the parents too. So you have to, they will only come into a community if a community invites them, and if that community is also willing to offer what they have by way of their own gifts and resources as in partnership. So, any other questions? Feel free.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hi. Yeah,
Sure.
I wanted to know, because one of the educational goals or pathways that you listed in your original system was teacher education. And I'm very interested to know how the system looks like there. You have public teachers, you have private teachers, and you have teachers in Fe Alegría. So what are the requirements? Are there differences? If you intend to recruit teachers from the student community, how do you identify who works with this and guides the students? Where do they go after they graduate from school? How do you manage that? If you have, I understand you left a long time ago. So, but what happened since then? And I really would like to know. And is there a possibility of transferring the credentials from public to private to Jesuit school system? Thank you.
This is a great question that I actually don't have the answer because, and I don't know, Father, if you're more immersed on that. I did read I was doing a little more even research on what they do on that sense, because I wasn't a teacher. I was more like receiving the education. That's actually one of the areas that they want to develop more, because I guess it's also the reality of the Jesuits is, they can't train everyone. And so they may do something in general, and they may have some particular requirements. But I think I didn't see that it was actually something concrete or developed that it was applied onto every single school or for every area.
Yeah,
But
well,
Father
the
Dan,
Fe Alegría Bolivia is divided, I think, into 5 different departments or zones, and each of those is responsible for hiring, training, and continuing professional development of each of their schools and their teachers. There's a lot of curricular development. We at times have been involved in helping them research the effects of some of their curriculum. In fact, John Nieva in our business school has applied a business assessment model to some of the operations of their schools and had that translate really quite well. So for some years, we helped craft for them a whole instrument that they were using for, in that sense, I think it was school assessment. Katie Campbell in the business school has also done a lot of data analysis for some of the parts of Fe Alegría. Amy Tarosky in our business school, as well as some of her other colleagues who more specialize in science and math education, work closely with the Fe Alegría schools in Haiti and developing curriculum. Now there too, in the Haiti system, there's about 38 grade schools. Some of them have high schools attached as well. But they also have, the Jesuits sponsor a teachers training college in Haiti. And so they train teachers specifically. That's what they're doing at the higher education level. And we have collaborated with that teachers college and might do more of that in the future. By the way, this week, the Hawk Dogs for Haiti will benefit the Fé Alegría schools in Haiti. Hawk Dogs for Haiti is please go, please buy a hot dog. If not, buy your friends hot dogs, because that money will go every year. We are sending resources to Haiti, which is one of the poorest countries in the world, of course. And the Fé Alegría system there is remarkable. So yeah, that kind of teacher education. So, you can see, as Katherine pointed out, what Fé Alegría does with the sectors. There's obviously typical instruction and sharing with content and developing the knowledge and abilities and talents. Then there's that extracurricular piece. So that's always been a part of Jesuit education. The first full-range plan for Jesuit education was 1599, the Ratio Studiorum. And it was put out for all these schools, not to dictate a common curriculum, not to dictate exactly what you should do, but to give a guides as to what creative options you could choose. And in there, the extracurricular, the competitive, athletics, theater, all of that, you should see the detail in which it encourages competition in a healthy way, ways for students to strive and be with each other in extensive social interaction. That Ratio Studiorum, even from as early as 1599, really outlines a full education that is not just by any means limited to the traditional subjects that would be taught in that late medieval curriculum that the Jesuits would have come up in the early society. So you can see that kind of guide and full encouragement to be as exploratory as possible and to meet the needs of a very particular context, as Katherine was pointing out. So in the other thing to your question too, Tatiana, is that in Bolivia, like as Katherine pointed out, they usually teach a half day. Usually education happens in 2 shifts, morning and then another set in the afternoon and another set in the evening, out of just gross need. And the government funds all the teachers, by the way. So a nice thing about Fé Alegría is they get their teachers' salaries paid, as would be true for any private or public school in Bolivia. Like a lot of the systems, they fund all the schools in partnership with whomever, public or private. The difference is that's often enough the Fé Alegría teachers who have done a lot of professional development and are often better credentialed, they often will teach another shift later in the day in one of the public schools. So there's a nice cross benefit that some of the public schools receive a better teacher for one of those educational sessions coming from Fé Alegría. That's not unusual for a Fé Alegría teacher to teach in a Fé Alegría school and continue to get this great professional development and understand a deeper and more up-to-date and innovative curriculum. And then to take that almost every day, if they teach another shift in a public school, to that public school. So there's a nice little kind of cross-pollination there that goes on. Fé Alegría also is not as subject, their school system is not as subject to some of the school shutdowns that often happen in Bolivia for political reasons. And therefore, some of the best curriculum development or consistent curriculum development too has come out of the Fé Alegría systems, and that gets replicated in the public schools. They're real leaders on what might be a new and necessary and needed curricular development for the country. So thanks for your question. Anybody else?
I think Jill had a question.
Sure.
Yeah. You both talked about the value-based education, and I was just wondering how you observed that when you're in the schools.
Well, one of the things I remember being in El Alto, where Katherine is from. By the way, that's a fascinating case study on urban development. If you ever want to study, there was nothing there at one time. It looked like the surface of the moon. It's in a very arid place, and now it hosts millions and millions of people in a thoughtful and very organic development. Fascinating story, the development of El Alto. But like one of the things Katherine mentioned, the fact that her high school had these labs. One of the schools we were leaving, we walked away. One of our folks was a member from our science department. We started to talk about how could we encourage and even fund one of their development of a chemistry lab, for example, at that school. So part of it is just accessing whatever advancements you need by way of teaching certain subjects in a fuller and deeper way. So Feligreas Bolivia high schools often will produce whole generations of scientists or science students seeking higher education. But also, I think you can see examples of ways in which too we would try to figure out how they would offer whatever it is, whatever particular new skill set. We were in very remote areas. One of the members of our communications department said, boy, you don't really, how many of you all have a device, a handheld device? They all did, all these kids. Of course they did. That's the world we live in. So we used to be a time when we first started going down there, we'd bring our old laptops with us. But we really don't need to do that because the handheld devices are a huge opportunity for education to occur there and access to a broader world and to the internet and through other ways of delivery. So it was that's really, really important kind of ways in which you can do that. I don't know if you had any specific things, Jill, you were thinking of.
Yeah, even that, or and the flip side of that, like Catherine, as a student, like how did you could talk about value-based education, but how did you see it and feel it as well?
Yeah, like I was saying, just being a leader, like I feel like my school really took it seriously on empowering the youth, and just trusting them. And my school was very worked very closely with the church, so Jesus Obrero Parish and Jesus Obrero High School, and they both worked together on working on that. So the values were based on first believing in yourself, because that is culturally, you're always put down, and in a way, the collective culture is really good at bringing the community together, but then it sometimes may lack of finding your own voice because you get lost into the community. So I feel like the value here was like, no, your voice is important and what you say is important and your talents are important, and let's raise you up. And it was really very essential for me to have that in order to even dream to come to the United States. I feel like that was Bolivia is so far away that you can't just come and cross the border. So you will have to travel so far away. So even believing that that was possible, I do think that came from that perception of like, I'm valuable. I can in a way, it's like I can do whatever I want. I can dream big. That's it. I can dream big. And I feel like that was the seed that the school had planted on us. And yet there's still, in education in general in Bolivia, there's still a lot of things that are not perfect and can be improved. I think there's a lot of things that also are valuable to rescue. But I also want to invite Danielle to, I don't know if you want to share a little bit, because I saw your message, your text.
It's been so many years, but even just seeing the pictures that you shared, like I could feel it. I could really feel it as you were talking about how those values like really are represented, and their model of education was so inclusive and like responsive to what, like Dan was saying, the needs of the communities are. And we visited schools that did like technical education for both high school aged or adults. We visited schools that incorporated students with special needs into the classroom, and like that was part of building empathy and like collaboration amongst students in the classroom. And so that was something that we discussed and reflected on, was like, how is that like living out inclusion in a different way than we might practice it in our education spheres here in the US. One of my favorite visits was a school that was for children with hearing impairments, and I think it's in or outside Cochabamba, and they bring the students' siblings to the school so that they learn sign language to be translators in their homes. So they maybe attend at that school for a a year or two to learn sign language to then be able to translate between their siblings and their parents at home. And that was so neat because it was, you know, like we were having a conversation among like 3 languages being translated back and forth. So it really, there was just so much focus and like really living out like holistic care and inclusion. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Danielle. And like Martha mentioned too, often enough, the Fay Alegría School interacts with the community. So there's often this expression of student talent to the wider community in some form or another. The other thing too is that Catherine's community, for example, her parish community is Jesus Obrero. That's a very unusual name for a Catholic church. It means Jesus the worker. We have St. Joseph the worker, but we never have Jesus the worker. That would be kind of an unusual name for a parish here. But in the context of El Alto, that's an empowering statement that Jesus is also a working person like us. Because again, El Alto was created by a lot of displaced people from other parts of the country. And really, they've created an entire, like I said, mega city out of nothing. And that kind of empowerment. The other thing is Catherine's own mother, for instance, in that community for many years ran a place, a safe place for women who were being abused, for domestic violence victims for many, many years. That was an empowerment that her mother experienced right there, and her brother is now serving overseas, right? He's in another country at this point. Catherine?
Yeah, he's in Chile and he's a priest.
And Chile, hopefully he can convert the Chilenos. That's going to be a big job, but no, I'm only kidding. But Chile and Bolivia don't always get along, just so you know. So he's probably, you know, don't always get along due to a border dispute. But anyway, yeah, those kind of, I think you find people who say, okay, where am I and what is the need here and how am I empowered to do it? And I think Catherine can see with just within her own family several examples of that kind of work, that kind of response.
One big thing that I see that it was a cultural shock for me was respect. Respect is very much big for youth and children. Respect to adults, respect to elders, something that I don't necessarily see here sometimes. And I always get shocked. I'm like, you can't talk like that to an adult, you know. And that's something that that also was very, very much reinforced and a value that now I see it, how valuable it is and how important it is to respect, you know, people who have more time on earth than us and we can learn from. And with that same respect, yeah, just going the back and forth with that.
We're going to have to come to an end here. Our time is up, but I want to thank Catherine again for being with us and sharing this what is really the largest piece of the Jesuit Educational Network, and also to know that locally we have serious partnerships, especially among our 3 Jesuit-sponsored schools, which is, of course, St. Joe's University, St. Joseph's Prep, and Jesus School next door to St. Joseph's Prep in North Philadelphia. 3 very different schools serving very different groups of students in different contexts, all of those which do a lot of collaboration together on many, many, many levels, by the way. And also a way in which, too, we at St. Joe's, too, have our partnerships beyond our own Jesuit schools, of course, not the least of which is our partnership with Gomper's school right next door, as well as many, many others across the city through the Faith Justice Institute, through our weekly service program and campus ministry, and many of our academic departments. So that kind of networking and that kind of sharing of Jesuit educational values in a broad sense with our partners definitely has an impact and rubs off in a very particular ways. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for this UAP discussion, Universal Apostolic Preference on accompanying youth to a hope-filled future, and education, of course, is one means of that. Tomorrow there will be one, Walking with the Excluded is another UAP, and Tina Marie Stoltz from our campus ministry, as well as with some of our students who have participated recently in immersion programs in communities that are underrepresented along the border or in Latin America. They're going to share tomorrow. And then Father George Burr will be sharing with us the 4th UAP, the Apostolic Preference, which is showing the way to God. So hopefully George can show us the way to God. We're looking forward to that. I know I'm looking to discover that from him. Thank you all for being with us, and take care. And we'll keep enjoying Mission Week. Hot dogs for Haiti. Send your friends, get a hot dog. It's a hawk dog, excuse me. Take care.